Hello Libra, and welcome to your year 2023 Astrology and Horoscope forecast. This is for the Sun or the Ascendant. I'm going to outline how I'm going to structure this video. Each year has 52 weeks, starting on the 1st of January, as we know, but within that year, the astrological calendar begins with the spring equinox this year on the 20th of March. And every 13 weeks, we have a cardinal quadrant. The first, the spring equinox; the second, the summer solstice; the third, the autumnal equinox, particularly relevant for your sign; and the fourth, the Capricornian cardinal quadrant. So what we need to do is just look at the last of year 2022's, because that happened on the 21st of December, but actually provides a backdrop for the first 12 weeks of the new year. Also, there was an incredibly powerful total lunar eclipse on the 8th of November, which provides a backdrop for the first 4 months of this year. Then, of course, the solar return. So that snapshot of what we can expect for the whole year. And there's something very exciting there for you, because there's a link between Jupiter, the planet of growth and fortune, and it's forging a wonderful alliance to Mars, the planet of passion, in a very daring and adventurous part of your scope. That's just a little taster. Then, of course, we have all the big changes in terms of the ingresses. So Saturn moves on March the 7th into the 6th house. Pluto, crucially, moves out of Capricorn on March the 23rd into Aquarius. Mars moves on from the sign of Gemini on the 25th of March. We also have a very important solar eclipse, which occurs on the 20th and 21st in your sector of relating. Jupiter moves on May the 16th, the North Node on July the 12th, also into a highly influential sector for you, your sector of relationships, feeding off the energy of that solar eclipse. And there is also a solar eclipse in your sign in October too. Now, specifically for your sign, we also have Mars moving into Libra on August the 27th, which is going to give you an awful amount of thrust in the following 6 weeks. But when the Sun returns to Libra with the autumnal equinox, it is in a tense angle to Saturn. So I do need to describe that to you. And of course, Venus, your ruler, is going to be going through a 4.5-month journey through your sign of friendship, the 11th house, the sign of Leo. So that could be really exciting this year for you. So what I'm going to do is go through each week of this year, just sharing with you the relevant dates and influences, but also talking in more detail about those very big events. Now, if you would like to ascend above this zodiac forecast, if you would like to order your year 2023 personal forecast, if you give me 3 pieces of birth data of time, date and place of birth, I can give you your individual year 2023 forecast. But if you order in year 2022, you'll get the rest of that year free. Plus, I give you your roadmap, your character analysis that can guide your moves for the rest of your life, and all with 30% off with my special package. Please see the link below. And finally, if you've yet to subscribe to my channel, I'd be honoured if you did so now. Please click or tap on the bell notification symbol. And if you've already done so, thank you so much for all your support. It really is valued. So Libra, let's just get a feel for what that total lunar eclipse of the 8th of November meant for your sign. It was in the sign of Taurus, and the moon was conjunct Uranus, the planet of restlessness. The 8th house is where we're most devoted, but it also, or invested, but it can also be around long-term finances. And because the sun on the other side of the heavens is in your second house of everyday money, but both are being T-squared by the restrictive energies of Saturn, I think in terms of the reality of the financial markets and the cost of living, I think for us all collectively, a lot of reality crashing in as 2022 came to a close. But in your case, I think what Saturn was reminding you on this event is how your values may not have aligned with someone or a certain group of people that in the past you may have felt you did have a closer connection to. Now that brings us to the fourth of the year 2022 cardinal quadrants. The reason that this is significant, it occurred on the 21st of December, is because this provides a backdrop for the first 12 weeks of the new year. Now the critical thing about this event is the sun returns to the sign of Capricorn. So for us all, it's about the things that we treasure that have continuity, the things that are traditional, and it is about the family for your sign in particular, and about our emotional responses. Now on this event, the sun was squaring with Jupiter. In a natal horoscope, that can make a subject quite generous, quite bubbly, but it's important not to say that we can contribute more than we're truly able to do. So when it comes to your emotional world and relationships, important not to get too much into trying to be in too much of a people pleaser in the first 13 or 12 weeks of this new year. Now that cardinal quadrant also sees an opposition between the moon and Mars. Now when that happens across, in your case, the 3rd and 9th houses, it can create quite a lot of tension between our emotional needs and the impatience of Mars. So you could find yourself at times tempted to blurt a few things out in rather an un-Libran characteristic way. Also, you could be quite restless in the first part of 2023, but the midpoint of this event is actually in Sagittarius, which for you is how you think and express your ideas, but connection to neighbours, siblings, but also your community and also digital interactions. But that squares up with Neptune in the sign of Pisces, which has been there since 2012 and has made you very sacrificing in that time, but also it's made it more difficult to define your own boundaries in terms of your physical needs or even your own health and energy. So I think that there is a potential for your nervous energy or your thinking to get slightly dissipated by what you feel you should be doing for other people in the early parts of this new year. But that brings us to the solar return, which is incredibly important because this provides a backdrop energy for the whole of 2023. And the standout thing to tell you is that Mercury, the planet of communication, is in retrograde in the 4th house. Now I know Pluto has been a very controversial transit for a lot of Libran people. So Mercury being retrograde in the sector of emotion and family suggests that, just like has been the case in recent years, it's still going to be very important to articulate your ideas, my ideas with my Libran ascendant with a great deal of care around those emotional or family topics. If you're hoping to move, maybe things could also be a bit delayed or may need rethinking or adapting in some kind of way. But Venus, the ruler of the sign of Libra, is actually forging a very powerful link with Pluto. This means there could be some fated connections this year that could affect where you live, but also your emotional life in a positive way. And we must very strongly push back against the notion that Mercury retrograde is an entirely negative phenomenon, because we can turn it to our advantage. So it's possible that there could be a revival around certain associations this year. But because of the leverage and power broker that Pluto is, we need to be sure that we're not giving away our power just because we want something to be back on a better footing than perhaps it has been. Now also, with that solar return, the midpoint between the Sun and the Moon is just under 7 degrees in the sign of Pisces. So that 6th house, which is going to come even more sharply into focus once Saturn arrives on the 7th of March. So this is your sector of health, fitness, well-being, diet, organisation, structure, the details. It's to do with purity and virtue. And that midpoint is in a square with Mars, in that part of your horoscope that's to do with being expansive and risk-taking. So there could be parts of you that find yourself a bit resistant to being sacrificing and making sure that all your obligations are met first before you then enjoy your own time. So it could be a little bit of a conflict between those two areas throughout 2023. However, as I mentioned before, Jupiter in your sector of relating forges a very dramatic and inspirational angle to Mars. When these two get together in a positive way, it really does create a lot of energy, a lot of passion, and a lot of excitement. And there could be someone that you're going to link up with this year that brings a real new energy into your world, as you can to theirs. And between you, you can forge a really wonderful alliance. Now, I should just say, of course, with the North Node and that solar eclipse also occurring in your 7th house, plenty of rich potential around relationships this year. But if we move forwards, we obviously can see Mars coming out of its retrograde on the 12th of January. So that's something to celebrate, because if you are wanting to be more adventurous, independent, and even being a bit more rugged in your physical activities, Mars going forwards helps you to output that energy in a very constructive way. But Mercury goes forwards also at the start of January. January the 21st sees the Aquarius new moon, often a great opportunity for you to showcase your talent, your flair, your creativity, but also it can be a time when you can emerge from your winter hunker down if you're in the northern hemisphere and develop a desire to mix and mingle and be more playful and demonstrative. But this one sees your ruler Venus checked by the rather somber energies of Saturn. If there is any romantic involvement or even friendship which isn't quite working, then I think Saturn is really asking you to review whether this has any future viability. January the 22nd sees Uranus end its long retrograde in your 8th house of deep transformations, but also around your longer term finances. If a property or business matter has proved to be a little bit unpredictable, even if in some ways productive, over those last few months, this gives you a chance just to collect your thoughts about how you can use your innovation in a way which does steer your future in a very anticipatory manner. So you're seeing opportunities, being quite entrepreneurial in your approach. Now, February the 20th sees the Pisces new moon. Excellent if you want to really be serious about thinking about how you can refine your diet, your exercise regime, perhaps also get a little bit more ordered at home. But this one is also influenced by Saturn, because Saturn's moved forwards now from that embrace with Venus, and it's right on the cusp of Aquarius and Pisces, but the new moon is right at the start of Pisces. So I think if there is something in your world where you know that perhaps you should be a bit more disciplined, whether it's around calorific goodies, whether it's around wine, a lack of physical exercise, perhaps using a few too pre-made meals, all these kind of things you're being asked to really scrutinize in a very serious way. But this is just the start of a period that's going to last for 2.5 years, which is pushing you to be much more self-critical, really, around how you lead your life. And this is ushered in by the arrival of Saturn in your 6th house on March the 7th. And it's going to be there right through to the 25th of May 2025. It's a long time. As often is the case with Saturn, it can take us a while to get a handle on the influence it's directing in that part of our situation. Now, of course, it depends on where planets are in your natal chart, how much this will impact you. But I think for all Librans collectively, this is a good time to think about virtue, to think about being more discriminating, especially in terms of that work situation. Neptune has really seen you bending over backwards to please people at times since 2012. I think the Saturn could make you a little bit more rugged on your boundaries. Not a bad thing. You don't mind covering for other people. Are they covering for you? If the answer is no, then you can push back. But essentially, Saturn always brings a focus on the parts of our lives which aren't working as well as they might do. So if you're already extremely disciplined about what you eat and drink, then maybe what Saturn is asking you to do is think about other parts of your existence that you might work on. So there are no real winners with Saturn. It's basically our own analysis of our own potential to improve. So getting a bit more self-disciplined all round is the key with working with this Saturnian energy. And the interesting thing about this year is that although Saturn is in this area, and if you're in a job that you don't really enjoy, you may look to leave it, or if you're in a job where your boss or your organisation isn't very appreciative of your efforts, a lot more criticism and analysis of your performance could leave you unsettled. But I think it's Neptune that's going to be the big player in your 6th house this year, as I will explain as this goes on. And Saturn actually does forge some very positive, not exclusively, but some very positive angles to other planets. Now, on March the 14th, Mars squares up with Neptune. If this rings a bell, it's because for the whole of October and November last year, within 3 degrees, these two were at a right angle to one another, and there was 2 exact squares. So this is the 3rd of the exact squares in the series, and it's because Mars is going through this giant transition through the sign of Gemini, lasting 7 months and 6 days, which ends on the 25th of March. So this particular aspect is just asking you to be conscious again of how you balance your need for freedom with the other part of your nature that may want to help others and be more sacrificing. If you're overdoing it and not really getting enough downtime or enough moments for yourself where you can enjoy your freedom, I think you could be a bit drained around this particular juncture. Now, March the 20th sees the spring equinox and the start of the Western tropical astrological year. This ushers in the sign of Aries. It's very much about initiation, getting on the front foot, having the courage to make moves based on our gut feelings. But for you, of course, this is your sector of relating. So really exciting. But this particular event also coincides with the new moon, the first of 2 new moons. The second is a solar eclipse in Aries, and this one ironically squares up with the ruler of Aries, Mars. And the reason for this is that the new moon's right at the start of Aries and Mars is right at the end of Gemini, so it's a disassociate square. So if we think of Mars as technically being in your 10th house of work and responsibilities, your relationships at work in the following 13 weeks can have some tensions, particularly if you're dealing with a line manager who tends to demand a lot and could actually be quite charming in terms of trying to gain your goodwill, but actually it's all in terms of what they want from the relationship. Conversely, it could be you. If you're someone who employs people, or you're someone who wants to gain greater recognition, your relationships are going to be very important to your progress in the following 13 weeks. Now, the midpoint on that event is also in Pisces, and it is conjunct Neptune, and they are square Mars. So once again, important to just get that balance between what you give and your need to do what you need to do for you. Now, despite the fact that Mars does forge that square with the Sun, it actually forges a much more constructive angle with Saturn. Saturn newly in your 6th house of details and precision, and Mars nearly in your sector of success. So it follows, the more your energies are well ordered and well directed, the better you will do. So if you can overcome that dreamy Neptunian influence, and which can be quite hazy, and really decide on what your strategy is going to be, don't try to do too much, and go through the processes very thoroughly, you can still make progress in that next 13 weeks. Also, Venus, your ruler, has or is on this event in Taurus, your 8th house. That can be good for gaining extra money in your professional situation, or a partner could have some good fortune, or an insurance payout or a legacy could bring good news. Now, this is probably the next thing I'm going to share with you, the thing you wanted to hear most of all. Yes, Pluto leaves Capricorn, but unfortunately it only reaches 27 minutes in the sign of Aquarius, and then by the 11th of June it's returned to Capricorn. But I'd just like to reassure you, unless you were born right at the end of Libra, so just before the sign of Scorpio, so pretty well on the cusp, I think the main challenge of the sign of Pluto will be at an end. However, of course, you know that as the years turned, Venus was influential on your ruler. So I still think the influence is going to be there, but for most Libran people, especially if there are those later degrees, the fact that Pluto moves into your 5th house flags up, gives you a taste of the dramatic changes that are coming in a much more substantive way from January 2024, and then it really will be much clearer to see. Now, also we have on March the 25th Mars making its way to the top of your situation. So for 6 weeks you can have added confidence and added vibrancy to raise your profile and be much more assertive and dynamic around your professional interests. Depending on where you live in the world, April the 20th and 21st sees the solar eclipse in your opposite sign. How exciting! It's also conjunct Jupiter, the planet of fortune. Yes, some good news can come around a relationship matter. Remember that Venus-Pluto conjunction at the start of the year, and the clue from that is telling you that if someone comes into your world, it needs to be meaningful at an emotional level. However much you're attracted to someone in, the standard romantic ways, in terms of looks, the way they dress, the way they may interact, something that's more substantive and emotionally alluring is likely to really trigger your interest most of all. Jupiter, of course, is about opportunity, so that's a lovely conjunction with the moon and the sun in the sign of Aries, but all three are squaring up with Pluto, and Pluto just at the end of your 4th house, just into your 5th, so quite karmic. Whoever comes in, yes, they could be someone who can have a massive impact on you, but I think it's a lot to do with how it feels rather than just the spark of that dynamic attraction, which everybody wants in a romantic relationship. But I think if there are also parts of the interaction which are very positive from an emotional viewpoint, a nurturing viewpoint, that's really going to be very important for you. However, on May the 1st, Mercury in your sector of shared finances does go into a retrograde. Right through the next 2 weeks, very important around contracts in particular, or in terms of big spending decisions, to really think things through carefully before committing yourself. May the 5th and 6th, depending on where you are in the world, really important. This is the mirror of the total lunar eclipse, which occurred on the 8th of November last year. This one is still going to influence your resources, but Saturn's moved on, so there's much less limitation. In fact, I feel there are opportunities because Uranus conjunct the Sun is asking you to be imaginative about how you go about things. Now, it's not always easy to personally influence things, particularly if we work for a bigger organisation. But maybe there's something that you could develop even part-time, where you can use some skills and ingenuity to your benefit. Now, on May the 15th, Mercury goes direct, and that's something that you're going to be pleased about, because I feel that maybe something to do with an outstanding financial matter will be quickly resolved, and then you get the support of Jupiter moving into your 8th house, and that's going to be a wonderful uplift to the more disruptive energies of Uranus. Jupiter moving into this sector for the next 12 months and 9 days, so the 8th house. So if you are a more entrepreneurial scale, this can be your chance to shine. Jupiter brings opportunities, and Jupiter really likes being in Taurus because Taurus has a natural appreciation of resources. Jupiter can, of course, be a rather optimistic influence, but I think the fixed energy, the earth energy of Taurus just keeps Jupiter's feet a bit more on the ground. So that can be something that you can really use to your advantage over the following year. Also, from May the 17th to June the 16th, the retreating North Node meets in a conjunction with that advancing Jupiter. This really can bring some good luck, and the high point of that energy is the 1st of June. The Taurus new moon, which occurs on May the 19th, is also forging a really great link with Mars in your 10th house. Your natural authority that comes from you being a cardinal sign is augmented brilliantly here, and your shrewdness and wisdom and managerial skills definitely can shine in the following month. Now, on May the 20th, Mars, the planet of passion, of drive, and of course of individuality, moves into your sector of friendship. This is really interesting because for 6 weeks it gives you the chance to be very individual but still find points of contact and collaboration with others, and of course you have a natural talent for that. However, on the following day, Mars goes into a crunching opposition with Pluto in Aquarius. But you know, that could actually be the signifier of some kind of chemistry that occurs between you and somebody you encounter. So things can get quite intense, but also see your pulse race quickly at that point. On June the 6th, however, perhaps one of the most important days of the whole year for your sign, because Venus moves into Leo. It's going to be there for those long 4.5 months. For sure, it does go retrograde for 6 weeks. But your friendships and connections to others, your network, your values, your higher values. The 11th house is very Aquarius, but of course the sign of Leo is very charismatic. So your warmth, your ability to get on with different types of people is really going to be boosted significantly. I'm really excited about this transition for you. However, on June the 11th, Pluto, yes, hardly our best friend, reverses back into Capricorn. Don't worry, it's only going to just nestle in Capricorn before inching into Aquarius in January next year. But on June the 17th, Saturn does go into a retrograde, and in the 6th house, it's kind of saying that important to measure the application of your drive and energy in a way which is quite precise. I think that's the best way to package Saturn in the 6th house. Because the sign of Pisces is watery, it can dissipate the more structural influence of Saturn. For us all, Saturn in Pisces is going to make us incredibly aware of our use of water, of our use of any resource on the planet, but also the pollution and contamination of rivers, lakes, and the sea. So I think that's going to become an even more of a hot topic over the next 2.5 years. But that Saturn going into a retrograde is kind of saying, look, you really have to try to narrow your focus with your efforts, because if you are trying to do too much, it will just wash away through the Neptunian influence of the sign of Pisces. However, on June the 18th, the Gemini new moon, ordinarily very positive for you, because this can be about travel, expanding your horizons, higher education, just being a little bit more free and easy and spontaneous. But it's challenged by, yes, you got it, Neptune. So a ninth, sixth house energy again. The ninth, sixth house, something has to give. The ninth house wants us to do what we want to do, live in the moment. The sixth house reminds us of our obligations. And again, Neptune can just drain us. So even with your social pursuits and your interests, I wouldn't be spreading yourself too thin this year. Now, we do have the summer solstice on June the 21st, which ushers in the sun's transition into the sign of Cancer, which is very much to do with nurture, protection, security, the environment. But for you, this is about your sector of success. So for the next 13 weeks gives you a fantastic opportunity to reach for the stars, but particularly because your ruler Venus is in a conjunction with Mars in the sign of Leo. They're not absolutely side by side, 3 or 4 degrees apart, but for you they're in the 11th house. So it can be a case of who as much as what you know in terms of cultivating your ambitions in the following quarter. Also, however, on that event, Jupiter in Taurus is actually forging a very constructive link with Saturn. So your ability to focus on what's really important, but then to understand where opportunities lie, Jupiter in the 8th house, and take very clear but systematic action in order to create a potential. So a very enabling angle between those two. July the 12th, however, another wonderful event for you. I want you to think back 18.5 years ago, because that was the last time, pretty well, probably could say slightly more than that because of the reversed action of the North Node. But the North Node moves into your 7th house of relating. It's going to be there through to the 29th of January 2025. The North Node is like our instinct, but it's also can be our spiritual direction of travel. It also can be where we get the rewards, the karmic rewards for all our past efforts. If you're someone who has worked hard at understanding yourself, how you interact with others, how to set your boundaries, perhaps through Pluto's transition through the sign of Capricorn, lots of people have made way out of your life. But it's because they are not good for you. They drain your energy. And however painful that process may have been, the North Node and the solar eclipse in Aries this year give you a fantastic opportunity to reinvigorate your relationship sector. So really exciting. Now, July the 17th sees a Cancer new moon in your sector of success, but it's linking with Uranus. So again, you're being asked to be open to new technologies, new approaches, and even the ways in which you can use the resources you already have in some kind of fresh, different or flexible way. July the 23rd, however, sees your ruler put the brakes on in the sign of Leo. It's lovely to have lots of friends, and obviously with the Leo influence, you know, being admired, respected, but most of all adored, is something that a lot of us would like. But we have to be realistic. And I think you could find out through to September the 3rd that some of the people that you've been hanging out with may be fun. They may like you, you may like them. But are they really right for you? And that question is going to be emphasized even more by the time of the Aquarius full moon, which occurs on the 1st of August. Also, because there's an opposition between Mercury in your 12th house and also Saturn in your 6th house. If you have got any worries about some of the people that you've been encountering, I think they could come to the fore at this part of the year. Despite this, there is an incredibly vibrant new moon in Leo on August the 16th, which is conjunct your ruler, even if in its retrograde. That 11th house energy provides a backdrop for the next 4 weeks, and it can see people radiating towards you. Maybe someone you encounter in a social setting, a friend of a friend, or a spontaneous connection, could turn out to be something more than just a friend. They could turn out to be someone you really get on well with, or even go all the way to a romantic situation. But I think basically the retrograde is telling you to really divine with great care who really is the right person for you, because Venus energy can be very charming, but it can in a certain context be a little bit superficial. And also some of the social pleasantries that Libran people have a great appreciation for, they don't necessarily reveal people's motives at a deeper level. So someone could seem to be very pleasant and seem to be fitting the framework of what is important to you, but actually in some way their values or attitudes may fall short. So just, use your wits at that time of the year, particularly once Mercury goes retrograde on August the 23rd in your 12th house, which could see you wanting to just protect yourself a little bit, just withdraw, be a bit more sensitive to your immediate needs. However, August the 27th is that wonderful arrival of the passionate Mars in your sign. For 6 weeks, this is really going to give you a jolt of extra energy and vibrancy, bring you more into the moment. But August the 29th, we see Uranus go into retrograde again. So once more, you're being asked to think, are you pushing yourself around your inner resources in terms of how you can perhaps work with the available monies you've got, or is the 8th house energy going to come out more in terms of intimacy? Is there part of you that resists intimacy because Uranus wants you to stay safe and keep a distance and be detached from the potential for intimacy? I think these are big questions, and they could come up through to the end of the year. August the 31st also sees a very tricky full moon in the sign of Pisces. That obligatory side of your nature, it may be grinding you down, or perhaps you could feel physically weary as the full moon combines with Saturn. Take care of yourself, don't try to do too much. But Venus does go direct on September the 3rd, and I feel that the end of the retrograde, which as I say lasts 6 weeks, you will get a much clearer sense of who you can truly relate to. Wherever you are in your journey in this life. Also, September the 4th, Jupiter goes retrograde along with Uranus in that 8th house. So Jupiter can be about your enthusiasm to connect in a devoted way, or it can be about those longer term finances. But with Uranus in retrograde as well, it's kind of saying to you that maybe it's a bit of a holding position in terms of big decisions. It will go forwards on December the 30th, and I think you'll get a much greater idea of what to do by that time. The Virgo new moon of September the 15th, however, is good for just refocusing your inner world. It forges a link with Uranus. Perhaps you do need some time out from everything and just have a little bit of a pause to really try to understand your deeper needs. But if you do go through a little bit of a period in early September where even if people are ringing up or texting and saying, look, come out and let's do this, and you don't feel you want to, then that's fine. That's absolutely perfectly fine. And Mercury does go direct on September the 15th, which will ease some of that inner anxiety or tension that you may have been feeling. Now, September the 23rd is a gloriously important event in the calendar because this is the autumnal equinox, and it's when the sun returns to your sign. So you'll move into the moment. For you, this is very much about your individuality, and being a cardinal sign, you are a leader. However, in terms of the overall zodiac, it's about our relationships. So you need to find a balance between what works for you as an individual and where you're prepared to support and help others, often a gift with you. But the midpoint on this event is actually in the deep Scorpio, and I think it can be very good for your finances over the next 13 weeks. But the sun is in a rather tricky angle with Saturn. It's a first, sixth house quincunx. So balancing what you want to do as an individual, the first house is your body, the sixth house is your organisation and approach. And I think if you're almost pushing yourself a bit too hard, you could wear down your energy somewhat. So again, it's about deciding on your priorities, something of a theme for this year. But Mars moves on October the 12th into your second house, can make you lusty, but also lusty for extra money. You can get on the front foot. However, October the 14th, a major event, because it's the solar eclipse in your sign, but it links with Mercury and they're opposed by the North Node. I see this as being tremendously positive for you because it can help you to articulate. You are an air sign, so the expression of ideas is a big part of your nature. It can help you to articulate what's important and essential, but the North Node in your seventh house can help you to cultivate the reception to that idea. So I think they're mutually receptive to one another. The lunar eclipse of October the 28th is in Taurus, and it is opposite the sun, but there's also the support of Saturn this time. So if we go back to last November, Saturn was the proverbial fly in the celestial ointment. Now Saturn is playing the good guy, giving you much greater ability to structure your finances in a really appropriate way. The Scorpio new moon also angles brilliantly with Saturn on November the 1st, the following month, an improvement in your finances. Saturn goes direct on November the 4th. Your physical energy may have been a little bit low. It should ease now, but it is all to do with how you're working the energy. So the energy you've got, how you're using it, and how you're trying to perhaps get more vitality from your own approach to various things. Like, you know, the fuel that we put in our body gives us an outcome. If we put the wrong stuff in, it makes us sluggish. And being a sign ruled by Venus, your appreciation of sugar could be quite strong. I know that mine is. And, you know, it's sometimes we have to just counter that and try to find lower levels of sweetness in terms of, you know, moving from the more glucose things to the fructose things, and then just finding the way to lower our cravings. However, on November the 24th, wonderful for you, Mars thrusts into Sagittarius. If you've been thinking about getting a new vehicle, a bike, a scooter, doing more running, just being that much more active, a wonderful transition. Also, the new moon of December the 12th combines with Mars, so your passion to express your ideas is really going to be very, very topped up. You're going to come across in a very vibrant way. December the 13th, however, sees Mercury go back into retrograde. So, you know, isn't it interesting how the patterns of astrology work? So it started the year in retrograde, it's going to end it in retrograde, but not in Capricorn, because on the 23rd of December, it inverses into the sign of Sagittarius, which for you is your third house. So choosing your words carefully at the end of this year will be important, but on the final Cardinal Quadrant influencing this year, which occurs on the 22nd of December in 23, what we've got is a great link between the Sun and the reversing Mercury and Jupiter, but also Saturn. So all that hard work and diligence and application can mean that you can work with Saturn energies very well this year, I feel. I feel that you have great benefits to come in your relationship sector with the North Node and the eclipse. I think the eclipse in your sign is saying, look, be true to yourself. There's possibilities around Jupiter and Uranus in your 8th house. But if Uranus has been making it difficult for you to let go of your autonomy and be really close, Jupiter can assuage that to some degree. But I think it's Venus going through the sign of Leo that's really going to be significant this year in terms of how you get to know people. But then I think the lessons of all that energy and all that influence of Pluto going through Capricorn that have really left quite a legacy, they're going to inform your decision making whilst those more sociable possibilities unfold. And at the end of the day, I still think what you're looking for is something that works for you at an emotional level, but not with all the heavy politics that have been so much to the fore in recent years. But don't be surprised if you find yourself in a new home this year, or a new, much more loving and much more emotionally significant relationship.